Good morning. Welcome back to our regular town hall. Well, it's actually not a regular town hall. In fact, this is actually an exception to our regular schedule. But it has, as you know, during the summer, we have tried to hold these town halls pretty regularly over every 2 weeks. We were thinking that there's been such positive feedback from the campus community and from students and others about this that we're going to do a weekly town hall. And the rough sketch is that every other week we'll swap. Sort of the topic would be essentially 1 week all sort of institutional or college business. So whether it's budget or programs, organizational changes, things that policy implications that might affect the campus. But in the alternate week, we would essentially focus on something thematic. And so whether it's the mental health challenges of our students, or what is deep learning, or in this case today, we're very interested in understanding together as a community what is the future of higher education. And we have we're really sort of honored to have a panel of incredibly talented and busy people, and all related to higher education, and have thought and spent a lot of time thinking about what does higher education look like in the future. And so just as we regularly sort of offer to you, we would love, as we go through the panel here, and as we go through topics that are interesting to you, that you want us to dig a little deeper, please engage us in the online Q&A format that we have. We will make sure that those questions get curated and collected here, that we can bring it back to specific speakers. But I would love to sort of make some introductions, and I wanted them to introduce themselves. And so let us start with Mr. Aaron Osmond. And Aaron is particularly interesting to us because he is the vice chair of the newly formed Utah Board of Higher Education. And so Aaron, welcome, or should I say Vice Chair Osmond, it's certainly nice to have you here and be introduced to the campus. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why these questions are on your mind.
Well, thank you, President. It's good to be with you and the group here today. I'll just share that, from a education perspective, I've been very involved in the last few years with the technical education side of our state. And as you mentioned, Brad, we have a new unified now higher education system where we've taken our 8 technical colleges and our 8 higher education institutions and brought them together in one organized effort. And there's a real important purpose about that we're going to talk about today. And that's where my passion is bringing career-ready technical and vocational skills and integrating that into the higher education experience for the benefit of the students so that they're ready for jobs and get a high quality education. That's where my passion is. And then I'll just say that professionally, on this higher ed board, it's a service role, which I really am grateful to have the opportunity to serve there. But professionally, I work at Amazon, at the Amazon Web Services team, and my role is all about workforce readiness. It's about helping states and countries enable students with access to skills to get high-paying jobs in cloud technology. So super fun connection there that I have as well. Just love doing both of these things. So it's great to be on this with you, President. Thank you.
Well, can't wait to hear your insights, and particularly as it might relate to Snow College. I think most, if not almost all of our audience today are either faculty, staff, or students, community members, board members of Snow College, and very interested in understanding the implications it might have with this new board and with Snow College's role in technical education, as well as general education and transfer and other things that we do. So it's a welcome. I'd also like to introduce Mr. Vince Grell, who's the Executive Vice President for University Partnerships at Grand Canyon University. I had a chance to meet Vince a year and a half ago when we traveled down to the Phoenix area and visited Grand Canyon University. It has a fascinating story, which Vince, will tell. But Vince, Vince, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and maybe that's the story of Grand Canyon University and why that is a story that that campuses ought to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the intro and the invite this morning, and looking forward to hearing from everybody. I've worked in higher education for just a little over 28 years. I spent 22 of those with the Apollo Group, as last 6 years as Executive Vice President of the University of Phoenix Online and of Axia College of University of Phoenix, which was our associate's degree option, our lower cost associate's degree option. Left Apollo in 2013. I joined Bridgepoint Education and ran all of their operations for their online properties, which included University of the Rockies in Denver, Colorado, and Ashford University in San Diego, which as of yesterday is now University of Arizona Global after U of A purchased Ashford. So there's some consolidation for you already to talk about. And then in May of 17, I made the decision to see what my kids looked like on the weekdays and stop flying back and forth to San Diego every week. And I returned to Phoenix and joined Grand Canyon Education as the Executive Vice President of University Partnerships. And of course, many may know this, some may not. Grand Canyon Education provides all the services for Grand Canyon University, both their online programs as well as their campus-based programs. And so all the student recruiting, the retention, the recruitment of adjunct faculty, right down to the help desk, processing federal financial aid, all of those pieces are done for Grand Canyon University by Grand Canyon Education. And so they simply outline the policies, the standards, the procedures, and Grand Canyon Education executes on those for them.
Well, thank you, Vince, for taking some time out of your day for Snow College. And at some point, I'd love to have you kind of sort of describe the story of Grand Canyon University and its story. So hold that thought. But let me introduce Dr. Johnny McLean. Johnny has a great colleague of mine. We felt that we needed to maybe have someone who represented a more traditional campus, sort of voice their thoughts and opinions about the future of higher education. Johnny brings with him some interesting skills, though, and perspective. That he's the chair of general education at Southern Utah University. He's also a tenured professor. He continues to teach, but he also has helped kind of oversee the transition of Southern Utah University to a much more sort of online format, while also trying not to undermine their face-to-face. So, John, you want to sort of introduce yourself? It's good to see you this morning. And I think, are you fighting a cyclone or somewhere on the East Coast right now? I think.
I am on the East Coast, and it just missed us, so we got lucky. But thank you for having me, President Cook, and thank you for allowing me some time to describe what we're up to at Southern Utah University. I think the Snow College audience will be interested to hear what's going on just to the south of them. So I started at Southern Utah University 10 years ago as a faculty member in the geology program. And I really embraced the experiential education mission of SUU. I spent my time doing everything I could to take students outside into the field. I was truly face-to-face all the way. A couple of years ago, I accepted an administrative role at SUU, and one of my pieces of my portfolio was to oversee this transition that SUU is currently undertaking to build our online programs. And really, I've seen my role as to make sure that that the essence of an SUU education, the essence of this experiential model, is maintained in the online environment. And it's been a challenge, and it's been a really fun kind of endeavor. I've learned a lot from a lot of folks, including a few of the people on this call. So I'm excited to share some of the challenges we've experienced, some of the successes we've had, and I'm happy to answer any questions that come through. So thanks for having me, President.
It's great to have you, Dr. McLean. And Dr. Roger LaMarca. Roger is a kind of a more kind of recognizable feature on our campus here. Roger is a principal at Sundance Learning, but also is a consultant for Snow College as we continue to transition in our online space, both in a traditional online experience as well as a platform we've developed on accelerated online learning, which he can sort of describe in a minute. But our partner, and Sundance Learning is our sort of online provider manager that has helped us sort of build this. And so Roger's been consulting with us on that, but also because of his long expertise in this space, is helping us build our regular sort of 15-week asynchronous online, which most people would recognize. So Roger, it's good to see you. Tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you, President. I really appreciate the opportunity as well to be here with everybody this morning. My background really has been online education. I started back in about the early 2000s with Brigham Young University when they were doing some distance learning. Worked with them as they were building those products, had the opportunity to work for some of the largest educational institutional providers in the world down in Arizona, and then had the opportunity to work in South America to build some online programs. I've had some opportunity to build some in Vietnam and in Africa. And then about a few years ago, I spent some time with Johnny down in Southern Utah University, and we worked really closely together building some programs there. And I'm really excited the last few months having started some programs here at Snow and working on building those. And as you said, President, we've got the accelerated program up and running. We ran a pilot through that program, and we're starting to get feedback on it and start to make some changes and adjustments to make that the highest quality program we can. And then we're working really closely with the traditional program. In fact, in the last few weeks, I think we've had close to 50 faculty members either design a new course or update their course here at Snow College so that it can be delivered in an online format and try to make this available for these non-traditional students and these students who are looking for online programs to make that a better option for them. So I've enjoyed the work. I love working with all of the faculty there at Snow College, and hope over time that I get to meet all of you and get to know you all better. Thanks,
Roger. Let me just start out saying that in the 30 years I've been in higher education, I have never I've never seen such a sort of turbulent, dynamic situation when it comes to higher education. It is fast moving, and so one of the questions that is going through our mind here is, what is the future of higher education? Specifically, what is the future of a place like Snow College? And so I'd love to have, and we'll start with Mr. Vice Chair Osmond. What I'd like to have, there are incredible forces bearing down on higher education generally. There are economic forces, there are demographic forces, there are global trends, there are government and state policy trends, there are different educational practice trends that are bearing down, technical innovations. So in your opinion, what does higher education look like in 10 years? And what are those things that we need to kind of keep our eye on? And what might this mean for a place like Snow College?
Well, there's a lot there, President, and I would love to wax on for a while and share my thoughts on that. But I'll zoom in on a couple of key areas that I'm seeing that I think are reflective of the changes that we recently made in the state around the higher education system. So first of all, we are seeing a really industry-wide global trend for a stronger, more integrated partnership with employers. The need for a workforce-ready population that is skilled up on the latest technologies and tools that employers need to fill in order to ensure the success of their companies and the economic development of a given regional or state area is a big deal. And so recently, the state looked at our technical college system and our higher education system and said, we want to bring these two worlds together. We want to stop this situation where a student has to make the choice between one or the other, or the perception that one is less rigorous or important or difficult or has more potential for a student. And bringing these worlds together in a way where we are enabling each student with the opportunity to have skills that are immediately work applicable, where they can gain stackable industry credentials and certifications in a way that when they leave the institution, they have immediately employable skills that are in high demand in their local marketplace. So that's part one. And then part two, as they're pursuing that, as they're getting those credentials, enabling them to get credit, college credit for that work along the way, and be able to apply that college credit at any higher education institution they want to go to finish an associate's or bachelor's degree along the way. It doesn't have to be an either or choice for a student. In fact, it really needs to be both. Our state legislature feels very passionately about the importance of bringing these worlds together and creating a tight partnership between our technical education system and our higher ed degree granting institution infrastructure, and bringing those worlds together in a way where it's seamless for the student, where they are clearly the focus, that we're enabling them to get all the tools and skills that they need and have a full educational pathway that adds great value and employability to the student. Now, I want to be super clear. I am not dissing in any way the value proposition of higher education. In fact, it is super important for the long-term employability and success of the student, both in soft skills, problem-solving skills, intellectual abilities, etc. We have to marry these two worlds, not separate them. Bring them together in a way that's very compelling. And I'll just say, President, down at your institution, that type of partnership is already happening. We're already seeing that close, integration with local employer needs, working closely on those tech education skills and enabling students to get credit for that and continue and pursue their associate's and bachelor's degrees. That's the model going forward, not just for Utah, but nationwide, from my perspective. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, there really has been a cultural challenge as we talk about higher education in the country and in the state. It really is. You're either a college goer or you're relegated to something else, like a vocational education. And I think that's provided a real disservice to, I think, our students, but also to our system. How do we make sure that students and families, when they look at higher education, they have this whole gamut, and that really vocational, technical education, CTE, is just as viable in terms of creating full lives, and satisfying careers?
Well, I'll just share this perspective that we have an obligation as education leaders and as a state board to do a much better job advertising and communicating the value of these different educational pathways to parents. Parents have a very highly reinforced perception that unless their child goes to college and gets a 4-year degree, that somehow they do not have an equal earning opportunity. And that is just not the case anymore. There are amazing jobs that are available that are based on technical certifications and industry credentials that enable students to go out into the workforce earning very high paying, in-demand job opportunities in their local market. And in fact, truly, when you look at it from a business perspective, we have a massive skills gap in our industry across multiple industries, from technology. Just think about the technology industry alone. There are hundreds of thousands of unfilled jobs every year that require specific technical aptitude and skills and credentials to get those jobs, and employers just cannot find them. So I think that that's the real issue, is it's creating awareness and advertising the value proposition. And then the second thing, like I mentioned before, is removing this perspective that it's an either or choice. A parent doesn't have to choose or shouldn't have to choose. A child or a student shouldn't have to make that choice. They should be able to do both. And if they complete a technical education program from one of our great tech colleges, they should be able to apply everything that they've done there towards a future associate's or bachelor's degree in the state, and make a choice to be able to take that to any institution in the state, not just the local one, but to any institution they want to work with. That is the panacea from our state board perspective, is to enable that kind of environment for the students.
For those that have just joined us, we've just been hearing from the vice chair of the newly formed Utah Board of Higher Education, Aaron Osmond. And I also want to bring in our guest, Vince Grell, who's the Executive Vice President of University Partnerships at Grand Canyon Education. Vince, I'd like to also have you weigh in on that perspective. What does education look like in 10 years? And in that, can you probably weave in the story of Grand Canyon's University's story? Because I think they were at really an existential point when they had to really do some dramatic things in order to stay relevant and actually stay alive.
You bet. Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you. And I'll also say I agree 100% with you, Aaron, that parents are part of the problem here. They need to better understand this value proposition. For some reason, I think in the minds of the parent, a lot of those short form programs look lower to middle class, and they look dirty, and they look dangerous, and they look assembly line, and it's all these old pieces that still sneak in, when in fact so many of these opportunities are based in technology, which, as you say, can be a springboard to something bigger and better. So I agree 100% there. On Grand Canyon University, and you may have to stop me here, so please do, because I'm very proud of the story of the institution, and proud to be working with them as our partner at Grand Canyon Education. But GCU was founded as a Baptist institution in 1949 in Prescott, Arizona. Was moved to Phoenix 2 years later in 1951 as a non-denominational university opportunity. It was never very large. It was always 500 to 1,000 students. Very strong liberal arts programs, strong nursing and teacher education programs, but financially always kind of on the bubble. And in 2004, the school found itself $20 million in debt, and decided to take on an investor to keep it afloat, thereby becoming a for-profit institution at that point. And so the folks that had invested in it did their best to try to run and operate a university. They didn't have a lot of background in that. Started an online program, also very small. So in 2008, they reached out to Brian Mueller, who at the time was my boss and president of the Apollo Group. And lo and behold, Brian took them up on their offer. I wasn't excited about moving to a 900 student school that was $20 million in debt, so I stuck behind at Apollo for a few more years. But Brian's goal was to make private Christian education affordable to all socioeconomic classes of Americans, and had a plan in mind for that, and took it to Wall Street and to the investors. Because it's a great story, right? We've got a 900 student Christian school in the middle of nowhere in Phoenix, Arizona, one of the roughest neighborhoods in the city, and we're $20 million in debt, and how about you invest in us? So somehow he sold that idea. I'm still not sure how that worked, but he was able to bring back $240 million from the launch of an initial public offering. He invested about half of that money into an online platform and the technologies that surrounded that, and the other half he put into the campus infrastructure. Again, there were about 900 students on campus at that time, about 500 online, give or take, and that was 12 years ago. So since then, we've been able to invest more than $1.5 billion into the campus infrastructure itself. There are now more than 85,000 students online at Grand Canyon University. About 22,000 students on campus this year. Will welcome 8,000 freshmen with an incoming GPA of 3.5 or better. Got an honors college with 2,400 students, incoming GPAs of 4.1 or better. And in terms of affordability, the average student, if you put ground and online into one big bucket, the average student pays $9,400 a year in annual tuition. And the tuition rate on campus is the same today as it was 12 years ago. It's been frozen ever since the street made the investment in the school. And of the students, and this is important also, of the students who graduate from Grand Canyon University, 36% graduate in just 3 years. And that's thanks to about 700 agreements we have with high schools across the country that give students access to GCU approved dual credit while they're in their high school careers. And so that really helps parents and kids shorten their degree to career as well. And so just from the standpoint of what I then do as part of that, Grand Canyon Education, as I mentioned, is a service provider. My role in university partnerships is to find 2 to 3, maybe 4 other institutions who are interested in accelerating their online growth. We know how to do that, and we'd like to take the model and share that model from Grand Canyon University and all the services we provide for them, provide those same services for, again, 3 to 4 other institutions that are probably in the Midwest, upper Midwest, the Northeast, the Southeast, somewhere relatively far afield from Grand Canyon University and our partner there, where Grand Canyon University doesn't do quite as well from a conversion standpoint and where the brand isn't nearly as strong. And so we've been at that for 18 months and we're still searching. But in essence, then Grand Canyon Education, as Roger had mentioned, as we started, is an online program manager, an education services provider. And that is certainly one route that I know a lot of schools have taken in the last 5 to 10 years as they've looked to grow their online programs, usually at a relatively small scale. We're looking to do this at a large scale because we're not looking for 50 partners. We're looking for just 3 to 4. So large scale could mean 4,000 students. It could mean 40,000 students.
Thank you, Vince. So how have you felt then by growing online, you've been able to actually preserve the on-campus experience? One thing I was struck by when I went down there 18 months ago was how beautiful the campus was, how new it was in terms of its facilities. You guys had just built a beautiful engineering building. You're debt-free. It seemed that if you were to stop, say, a GCU student, an on-campus GCU student that is living in the dorm, they may or may not know that you have a very vibrant online program, it seems to me, because it's a university, a face-to-face university in every measure for those that want and are inclined for that kind of experience. Is that an accurate kind of characterization of maybe on-ground students there?
Yeah, I'd say it's very accurate. We're very traditional in the way that we teach. We're very traditional in the way that we advertise our programs. And quite frankly, I think our online population, which probably averages 32, 33 years of age, obviously some younger, quite a few older, but I think if you were to ask them, they love being part of a traditional environment. That's something that at University of Phoenix we were never able to offer. And I think there was a disconnect for students. Our online students love the fact that we have Division I sports and that we have programs like Lopes on the Road, where we invite, as many people will come with free tickets to the game in their local area, the basketball game or the volleyball game or whatever it is, so that we get people to show up in their purple Grand Canyon University attire. We stream chapel and have a lot of people participate in chapel, and they can see the 700 kids that make the choice to show up to chapel for speakers every week. It's just, there's a lot of ways to build that unity, but if you look at the statistics, and I can't remember, it might have been Inside Higher Ed or an entity, they'd made mention that online students weren't choosing online because that's where they wanted to go or how they wanted to consume their education. They were online because they didn't have the opportunity to attend a traditional campus. And most would prefer to do that. Their lifestyle simply doesn't allow it, but that doesn't mean that they don't want the trappings of that. And the more of those you can provide in an online environment, the more those students feel as though they're part of something larger than just, this technology that's floating in the atmosphere.
Dr. McLean, if I can bring you in, what does this tell us as public institutions in Utah, that story of GCU? Is there anything to learn from that? And if so, what?
I really appreciate the story, and I was there at the same time President Cook was, and what a fantastic experience that was. We learned so much. One of the things that it makes me think of is about the future of higher education, and when I think of that, I think of what will be different than the history of higher education, and I think we've been in this model for a long time now, where institutions of higher education offer a set of courses, a set of programs, and in a certain modality, and then expect those who can come and participate to come and participate. The difference, I think, in the future will be, and really is right now, that we have an obligation to not only continue providing that experience, but also meet people where they are. And just like Vince said, a lot of students would love to come to attend a face-to-face institution, but they simply can't. And so in my mind, it's really about the audience and the various audiences. We will always have that population of 18 to 24-year-olds who are able and who want a face-to-face education. That's never going to go away, I don't think. And we need to prioritize that at our institutions, Snow College, SUU, Grand Canyon. That needs to be a priority. People need to identify with a place. They need to have that kind of experience, and we need to continue prioritizing it. It just turns out that there are a lot of other people who simply can't. I think this ties into Aaron's comments about technical education also. We have a lot of people who want to participate in the mission of higher education, who want to pursue educational goals, and who want help in reaching those goals. That's what we're here for. We just can't continue to rely on this face-to-face model solely. We have to rely on it for those people who can attend, but we can't only rely on it. So I think that's what I really learned from my experience at Grand Canyon a couple years ago, is we can do both. We can continue serving that face-to-face audience, but we can also help a whole lot more people achieve their educational goals.
Thank you. So Roger, this actually brings up a question about the demographic shifts in the country about students. And I actually agree with Dr. McLean that there will always be a place for brick and mortar institutions, because this sort of coming of age, sort of high touch residential experience for many, right, is the right choice for their education. But we're also seeing major demographic shifts, that 18 to 20-year-old demographic is not constant. We're starting to see the drop in the 18 to 20-year-olds, especially in the Northeast and Midwest, et cetera, So tell us a little bit about your thoughts about the future of higher education and why demographics are actually going to matter to traditional campuses like Snow College and SUU.
Really love the question, because the demographics that we're facing in these next 10 years and now again in the next 20 years are going to be very interesting. I'm sure all of you remember back in 2008 that we had a very large recession that impacted the whole world. And during that time, we saw birth rates decline dramatically. Well, in about 4 years, all of those students are going to be graduating from high school, because that's 18 years after 2008. And what we're going to see is a huge decline in the number of high school graduates across the country. And that decline in high school graduates is going to impact higher education all across the nation. And we see some institutions who are preparing for that. In fact, Vince commented this morning that University of Arizona just purchased a university so that they could start doing more online. We've seen that at Purdue. We've seen that at ASU. We've seen it at North Carolina University. All of these universities these big schools especially are starting to prepare. What we see though, and where we believe the biggest impact is going to be, is on the small privates and the small regionals, because the big schools will have the brand and the reputation to attract those audiences. But the small regionals and the small privates, especially the more expensive small privates, are going to have a really hard time attracting that audience, especially when there's so many other universities out there who are trying to attract them. Now we look at COVID, and I'm thinking, great, we're going to get through this 5-year period of low demographics. Then we're going to have another 5 to 10 year period of positive numbers. But I think that after that, we're going to see birth rates decline again because of the situations that we're in today, because of the uncertainty. And that's going to throw us right back into a scenario 18 years from now when we may see birth rates declining again. And if that occurs, it becomes very, very challenging for an institution to make it through a storm, weather some good years for a while, and then make it through a storm again. And those smaller schools are the ones that I think will be impacted the most. And that's where I believe innovation is the biggest key to this entire the entire problem that we're facing in the future. Aaron talked earlier about combining the traditional with the tech schools, and I've had the opportunity just recently to see some data from about 900 Utah-based families who have kids in high school and what they're looking for in relation to their college experience. And when we pose the question, would you like to see your child get a technical license that can be stackable towards a bachelor's degree, it was overwhelmingly positive. The parents were saying, wow, that would be a great process. We would love for my kid to not just have a 100% bachelor's degree, but to combine that with career-ready skills. That would be so powerful that we would want to send our child to those types of institutions. Well, if Snow College can position themselves to make that claim and build that curriculum and put it in front of those audiences, even though they're a small regional in a state where we in an environment where we're going to see declines in potential students, I believe that we can attract those audiences. We can really show them the quality of the programs that we're providing and really help them move into career-ready worlds as soon as they graduate and as soon as they move on to the next step in their careers.
One great definition I heard about innovation is this: innovation is thinking and acting before you have to react, right? So you talked about the traditional decline in traditional students, but what about non-traditional students, right? What about underserved students that are 25 and older? And what do you think about that definition in terms of innovation? Really is acting before you have to react to these exogenous forces that are coming down on us.
Yeah, this is a great question as well, because again, there's approximately 5 million high school graduates every year. Okay, and as I just said, we see that number declining as we get to 2024, 2025, somewhere in those ranges, and so there's 5,000 traditional universities competing for those 5 million high school graduates. okay? But there are 200 million working professionals who do not have a bachelor's degree. And these are individuals between the ages of 25 and 50 who maybe have some college, no degrees, or maybe have who do not have a bachelor's degree to take to their careers. And that's where we see institutions really being able to innovate, really being able to meet the needs of these audiences. We see so many of them who are career changers, who have been in a career for a long period of time, but are now saying, I need to move into tech, or I need to move into leadership, or I need to move into an area that's different than what I'm doing, but they don't have the credentials in order to do that. And that's where online really has the opportunity to flourish, because there's so many of them. There's a lot less competition, honestly, and an institution who can do it really well and prepare these individuals for careers will be able to grow and meet their needs and provide really high quality education.
President, can I jump in on that point?
Of course. Yeah.
So Roger brought up how many Americans there are who don't have college degrees. I think that at some point we as we in higher education really need to be honest with ourselves about why that is. And some of the statistics that I've read show that about a third of high school graduates don't attend any institution of higher ed, and 2/3 do, around 2/3. And then of those 2/3 who do, fewer than half of them actually complete, which means that while there will always be that need and that audience who wants face-to-face education, it's only working for about a third of our high school graduates, which tells me that we really need to innovate. We need to find a way to help others, the other 2/3 of America who really would benefit from an education, from a formal higher education, but we're simply not providing those options, or we haven't been. That's where the innovation needs to be, I think. Maintaining our current status and innovating to reach these other audiences for whom it just hasn't been working.
You know, higher education has, Vince, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think part of this goes right back to the definition of insanity, right? Where we believe that, well, the student failed 6 years ago, and now that they're a working adult, they have a much better opportunity of succeeding and completing their degree. While that may be true for some, the percentages are relatively low, and part of the reason is now that 33-year-old has a job and a family and children and other responsibilities and things pulling at them where the 4-year degree may never get them where they want to or need to go, but something in shorter form could get them there. And you know, we often refer to this as fool's gold in terms of, well, let's re-enroll, let's get them back in. We know that through Axia College at University of Phoenix at a $250 per credit hour rate, people will raise their hands and jump back in at a low price point. But ultimately, are they going to get where they need to get? And the answer overwhelmingly is no, and unfortunately is no.
President, I'd like to add something there too. I think that it's really important for us to recognize that the factors that influence these decisions of potential students are multifaceted, but they often fall into the category of time and cost. And when you look at our current higher ed infrastructure, we're so focused on time in the seat, having students sit through the classes and complete, the assignments. We really are starting to feel, though, the pressure to enable more competency-based acknowledgement of those that have already achieved certain skills or knowledge or experience, rather than requiring these individuals to go through class after class to obtain a specific degree on information they may already know. So I want to be super clear, there is great value in the structure we have, but the opportunity to move to more of a competency-based education solution to recognize and reward and acknowledge the skills and abilities that people have already acquired without requiring them to go through all of that educational experience in order to revalidate it. It's cost effective, it's time efficient, and that is what people are asking for right now. And the other piece about our tech education, I just want to point out that because of the fact that our tech education at times is separated from that historical four-year degree experience and all the elements that we get great value out of relative to the research elements of our institutions, the cost associated with that educational experience is often so much lower. It's so much more cost effective for many people to pursue those paths because the overall cost barrier is so much lower and their time effectiveness is so much higher. So I think as we look to innovate, we need to find ways to recognize those time and cost barriers and really look at our students like a customer. How can we help them get the most amount of value for the lowest total price and the least amount of effort without minimizing or diminishing the quality of the educational experience that they're going through? That's my thought on that.
You know, the late and great Clayton Christensen, the Harvard Business School professor, most of his academic work was around disruptive innovation. And he spent a lot of time about disruptive innovation in private industry, but he also spent some time thinking about what this might do to higher education. Of course, he predicted a vast sort of erosion of traditional higher education institutions throughout the country. In fact, he predicted about about half will be either gone or essentially sort of combined. But what lessons do you think we should be learning from the tech industry about digital disruption? Higher education is very slow. We often get criticized as being very unresponsive or very slow around these things. And yet I think on one hand, we in the academy feel like, well, but there is something to protect. There's something to, that's right here. But there's a lot to learn. What are those things that we can learn from, say, private industry practice without the baggage and the risk that might be inherent in a for-profit kind of enterprise? Any thoughts there, gentlemen?
I think Vince mentioned earlier the Axia College model, and I had an opportunity to work on that model as well 12 years ago or however long it was, and Vince was right. Students were raising their hand. In fact, within a year and a half, I think there were 60,000 students who raised their hand and said, I want to go back, I want to get a degree, I need this in my life. But what they struggled with was finishing and being successful and using that to help them really advance their careers. And I think we can learn from that. Having had the opportunity to work on that, see those students, interact with those environments, I think we can learn that, yes, there's a need, but if our quality and our curriculum and our learning outcomes and our career readiness are not where they need to be, well, then it doesn't give the student really what they're looking for. And 12 years later, as we look back on that learning, we can say we can design better products, we can use better technology, we can create better systems to really make this a much more engaging and active environment where students can connect with each other and learn and grow and really develop. And President, I know you've been really a strong part of the accelerated online program that's been built at Snow, and that's exactly its goal, is to try to connect these audiences, prepare them for careers, use competencies to meet them where they're at, but then develop them and put them into projects and opportunities to grow. And we're working on this. I would not say today that it's 100% where it needs to be, but as we're getting the feedback, as we're getting the responses, as we're looking at the assignments every single day, we're finding better ways to engage with those audiences and help those students grow and progress.
Any other thoughts there? Yeah, Vince.
Vince, we've got you muted, I think.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. As Clay Christensen would say, part of this is asking what job is education doing, right? And part of that job is to assist the student in building a career. I know part of that is the experience as well. I think probably the student would tell you more so than the parent. In the parent's mind, it's more education to career perhaps, but I do see with again, Grand Canyon University as a partner, what they've done from a student standpoint, an internship standpoint. There are 12 student-run businesses on campus now, including a marketing and advertising agency where students in their sophomore year can start working for this agency. We go to work, or they go to work for those high school institutions that Grand Canyon University is partnered with, and help them put together promotional material for their high schools, announcements. This is fairly simple stuff, but it's, you know, when they charge pennies on the dollar for that work. But the student has a work order and a timeline and a budget, and they understand how this works starting in their sophomore year. And I think those opportunities are critical. I know a lot of schools now are working with innovation centers as well. Grand Canyon is trying to house as many of its former students as well as other businesses from throughout the community, and in exchange for free space and an area to start their startup business, that employer then needs to provide internship opportunities for Grand Canyon University students, so that as opposed to working at Chick-fil-A, which I'm sure is wonderful, the benefits are great, but it may not get you the career that you want inside of a year. And so we've got a lot of students doing that as well. Critical to this whole piece. And I think more universities can probably take a page out of Grand Canyon's book. The intellectual property is that of the faculty members, and I understand that at many universities. It's a centralized curriculum online anyway at Grand Canyon, and so that wouldn't be the case. But even that intellectual property of the students that is developed while that student is on campus is often property of the university itself. And GCU has turned that on its head and said, no, the student owns the intellectual property, whether they figured out how to do whatever it is in our labs or through by way of help with our faculty members or not. And not only that, but we're going to give this student space to launch that new business when they launch it. I think it is a kind of a behind the scenes change. It probably sounds a lot simpler than it is, but I do think it's critical to encourage students while they're in the classroom who understand those policies, that if that intellectual property is theirs, they're much more motivated to go after something while they're still in their junior or senior year.
Vince, I love that. I think that's a really interesting and very innovative strategy. I look at schools like Snow College and I think, how do we implement something like that? And when you look at the departments, when you look at your day-to-day, when you look at the amount of work that's pressing on all of our faculty currently, it's really hard to redesign, restructure, rebuild the way we offer courses, work with so many different departments and individuals to put those pieces into place and really kind of change what the experience that a student will have. And it's a lot easier sometimes to say, okay, I love the idea, but how do we do that? And so we're just going to stay where we're at. And maybe Johnny is a good person, or maybe Aaron, but how do we as an institution at Snow, how do we give our faculty the autonomy and the resources and the time and the ability to be effective, to do those things if they want to, right? And I know that in some scenarios that may not be a really good fit, but in some scenarios where they're wanting to be more creative or be more innovative, how can we support that on our side?
You know, Roger, I think it's a really good question. At SUU, what we're trying to do is first and foremost be crystal clear with our communication, and we're trying to align responsibility and authority with expertise. And what I mean by that is we're trying to we have built up significantly our resources in our online teaching and learning office with significant instructional design support, multimedia support, but ultimately the faculty members have the expertise for the classes. And if we can be clear in our goals and we can communicate our goals so that we're all pointed in the same direction. And if that direction is to meet new audiences with our online and our tech programs, and the faculty are on that same page, and we say to our faculty, how can we best meet these new audiences? You are in charge. We are providing, we as the administration and the online teaching and learning office, we are providing the support. That innovation and that creativity is going to come up through the faculty, and we have every confidence it will, and we're already seeing it happen. And what we think will emerge, and what has been emerging, is the faculty will then begin to come to the administration and come to the online teaching and learning office and say, this is what I want to do, this is the support I need, can you provide it? And then it's our responsibility to provide that support. But that's really where we need to get to, and it really comes down to clear communication, getting on the same page, going in the same direction to meet these new audiences' needs.
Can I add with one last thought on this topic? You know, the pace of innovation in industry is a major driver. And when you think about software and technology today, software changes so rapidly that you don't even have anymore a copy of software that you install on your machine. You access it on the web, and the features of that software are changing all the time by these vendors. In Amazon's case, all of our technology is in the cloud. All of our services are in the cloud, and they're constantly being updated. And the only way to really address that from an innovation perspective and support the faculty in trying to deliver training on these topics is to give them access to that technology and enable them to flexibly and easily change their curricula. So for example, in the case of AWS, in our cloud degree solution, we specifically provide access to pedagogical content that is flexible and easy to integrate into existing programs. Vendors have to come to the table as well to support this challenging learning environment by providing resources and tools and hands-on labs and solutions that are constantly updated and available to the faculty to make those changes in an education setting. And that partnership, in my mind, is super critical to make this work. Vendor and industry can't do it without the help of education and that infrastructure in education. We have to partner together to achieve the goal of addressing the skills gap that's in the marketplace. We can't operate independently, and I think that's the real power of this new model, is building close, tight relationships with industry, understanding the local technology needs, the pace of innovation and change, and working together to address that speed of change that's taking place in the market.
I had somebody ask me just recently, why would I hire a third party if I can build it myself? And I know Vince is smiling. I can see him smiling because he has a boss who thinks that way. And my response to them was you can, right? I could go out and I could build an Apple iPhone if I wanted to. I could go find the partners. I could put the pieces together. I could do that. But my time, my cost, my focus, what I'm trying to accomplish becomes, it's a whole different world. And that's where, when we can go and access materials that are already built, that are already available, we can actually focus on what we do best, which for our faculty would be in the classroom, teaching, engaging, and focusing on the students, and utilize those resources that are already there, rather than trying to rebuild something that already exists. And yes, over time, probably the costs are greater over time. But when you look at getting there, innovating, working quickly, meeting students' needs, focusing on the areas that are most critical to our day-to-days, those partners can be very helpful for those types of items.
Roger, that's exactly the conversation that's been going on at University of Arizona, I guess, for the last 5 months.
Yeah, especially with them choosing to go out and purchase a university to solve their online needs rather than building it themselves. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me remind our audience that we now are at the top of the hour. We've got about another 25 minutes for the panel. We would love to engage your questions. We do have one question that I'd love to pose to the panel, and this was from someone who said, listen, I agree philosophically with what we're saying about better alignment with industry and technical education and more offering. But there is a question. They say that what is then the role of a traditional campus anymore then? Does it have a future? And I think that's a question that a lot of people at Snow College might be having. Is this a major threat to what Snow has been known for, or in the case of SUU, what SUU has been known for historically? What is the role of traditional colleges? Let me throw that out.
Well, I'll jump in with a quick thought. I think this is a super important question. There is a critical role for our traditional higher education infrastructure, but like we've talked about, we have to make some changes and innovate it, make it more applicable and valuable, and create a tighter partnership with this other piece that is being asked for by our customer, the student. But when you look at, for example, as a state, we hear regularly from employers that students, when they enter the workforce, do not have the appropriate soft skills and abilities to succeed in a workforce setting. They may even have the technical skills, but they lack the problem-solving skills and presenting skills and interpersonal skills and things that are necessary to succeed in a work environment inside our new, very competitive, complex, global economic environment. And while it is not only the responsibility of higher ed to address those soft skills areas, this is where a traditional education, a well-rounded education, enabling our students to understand those elements and bring all of that together successfully in a workforce setting come together. So I think that as, for example, a board of higher education, we also have to do a much better job about announcing and promoting and communicating the great value proposition that our higher education system has to families as well. There is a bad rap that has been developed nationally around higher education. But uniquely in Utah, we actually have a very cost-effective, very efficient, very focused higher education system that is tightly integrated already with industry, that is partnering very effectively and creating great value from an education perspective in the state. And it is much different than what's happening in other parts of the country. So we have to acknowledge that, recognize and reward that, and communicate that value proposition to the rest of the state, just like we need to integrate technical education, more messaging into that to parents as well.
I really agree, Aaron. That's very well put. And I guess I would just add that we need a two-pronged approach. One prong is to continue to advocate for the value of a traditional college experience. And we need to continue to meet the changing demands of our state and of our country. And to think that a traditional college education should be static through all of the changes we're experiencing, I think is to sell ourselves short in how we can evolve through time. So I definitely think there's a responsibility to advocate for the value that we provide, but we also need to pay attention to industry needs and to what our various audiences want. I think that's important.
I might add too that as we look at universities across the nation now, and there's a lot of them now. In fact, I think we're up into the 95+% of universities across the country that are offering online options for students, and then a smaller group who are offering it really well. But as you look at those, the Arizona States, the Purdue's, the Grand Canyons, that have that on-campus experience and that online experience, it is a two-pronged approach. They're focused on different audiences, they're focused on different strategies, but the learning outcomes are very similar. In fact, I know at Grand Canyon they're identical, they're exactly the same. I know that what the students are able to take with that degree and do when they go out into the workforce is similar because they're getting very similar experiences. But it allows us to diversify our audiences, it allows us to diversify our products and really have a very strong traditional experience and then the same very strong online experience so that we can really meet the needs of both of these audiences.
Let me bring in a comment from our audience, and let me read this to you because I think it's a well thought out. And I'd like you to respond. It says, as roughly 40% of college graduates say that they end up not using their degree, and almost 30% of graduates saying that they can't even find a job in that field, when can we look at getting rid of some of the degrees or programs that don't lead to real jobs? Are we part of the problem in deceiving students by helping them believe that degrees that don't have a real market value will be a good investment for them? It just seems like there are a lot of worthless degrees, so we can innovate all that we want, but it seems like innovation will only be as good as the opportunity or investment that we're offering our students. Is that a fair comment?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's absolutely fair. I read recently 25% of private colleges across the country are now running at a deficit. You know, and at a time when, you know, as you said earlier, President Cook, students are already discounting tuition. State funding has shrunk considerably in most states. The natural pressure, I think, for higher education is for costs to increase, and part of that, I think, is due to the increasing complexity in higher education. Certainly COVID is proving that out right now. It's adding to that complexity. But I think a lot of this is also due to a lack of economies of scale. And I think that comes in often when there are niche programs at schools that exist because of the tradition of the school that perhaps people can't let go of. And if indeed the job of education, or part of its job, is to lend itself directly to a career, schools have to be increasing their odds in being able to make that happen for their constituents, for their customers, for their students. And so that goes back to our making sure that we do tie that direct line and get the student there, I think, as quickly as we possibly can. So back to the previous question, I think there will always be a place in higher education for doing that. But I can also say, in working with a lot of partner schools, and I know this, I don't know that this is controversial, but I know how difficult it can be. We often, as a third party, are speaking to a leadership group at a small-ish institution that happens to be in financial trouble. And we are told that. And that's why we are being brought in, and that's why we are being talked to as a potential third party to bring online education typically into that institution, and they have a profitability goal or a revenue goal as well as a student goal. Unfortunately, so many times the faculty don't know of the issues going on at that institution. And so you've got some faculty anyway who are holding on to those traditional pieces, and they are not letting go of those, maybe because that's specifically where their background and interest lies, when in fact that program is failing, and it's part of a bigger problem that no one has yet communicated to the faculty, but that they're willing to communicate to a third party. And so now we go in front of a faculty, in front of that faculty as a third party, and we get dashed because we're bringing online education in, and how dare we, and we're not certain of the quality, and we don't know how it works. When in fact, if we're not able to come in, or unless there's some other innovation that's very quickly thought through and figured out, that individual is not going to be there any longer. And so those are difficult conversations to have, but we see that time and time again with potential partner schools.
Johnny, looks like you got your hand up.
Yeah, can I just add one more piece to that? I think, President, your question was, is that a fair comment? And I think that it depends on how we are measuring success. And if we're measuring success by how many students we're helping to find jobs, how financially solvent the university or college is, then that's a really fair statement. I think that the challenge, and Vince alluded to this, the challenge is when there's a communication breakdown between the administration and the faculty, and if the faculty don't know of the financial challenges, if the faculty and the administration have different goals for the institution, if the faculty, if certain individuals are seeing the goal of the institution as providing kind of a luxury to students instead of helping students find their way toward a career. When there are those communication breakdowns and folks are on different pages, we're going to run into these problems, and we will continue to. I really think that so much of this boils down to clear communication and shared values, shared goals.
I might add to that. I think it not only does it start with the faculty and the administration, but I also think, especially in Utah, that it goes up to the state and the state level, because we know that the institutions in Utah are funded at a very large percentage by the state. And if the state is saying it needs to be career ready, and it needs to be whatever the state is saying, that determines how much funding comes to these institutions. And I'm not saying we have to adjust ourselves based on what the state wants, but it's an important factor to remember that we might want to do something great from a Snow College perspective, but if it's different than what the state is wanting us to do, that's going to make the funding really difficult on the other side. And so there's a lot of players. We've got to keep all of those in mind.
That's a great point, Rod.
Aaron.
Just one last thought on this too. I love what you guys are saying, and I think that it does come down to clarity, both from a state and from an institution perspective, about what our objectives are. Ultimately, as we look at the change that the legislature recently made in Utah, the message was very clear that we need to provide both the ability to get a good job now and have a high quality, high value education, well-rounded education as well. And that we are setting both funding and policy parameters at a state level to give that general direction. Then it comes down to also empowering each college president with the ability and the flexibility to figure that out for their local market. And I want to end with this thought that I think that each institution has to have a close working relationship with their local employer community and a really strong sense for what their customer is looking for, the student. We cannot operate in our own ivory towers and make assumptions about what the students need. We have to find out, we need to understand and see what they're actually dealing with, understand their actual opportunities and risks in the marketplace based on the education we provide, and craft a solution around their needs. If we truly have the student as our customer, and that is the purpose for why we do what we do, not to protect jobs for faculty with the greatest respect, but to ensure our students, our customer, are successful in the marketplace, both with skills, quantifiable skills, and abilities. I think that's how we will get our system on track. But in my last thought there is that we really have to align both state and institutional vision, mission, and direction, and then empower local presidents and staff to go figure out those relationships locally, and we'll get there.
Great. We have about just 10 more minutes before we need to sign off. This is a question from one of our faculty saying, speaking in the short term, immediate needs, what could we be doing as faculty to bring opportunity and value to this effort to expand online education at Snow? Any advice here to that particular faculty member?
I would just echo perhaps what Aaron had already said in terms of the partnerships with business, and understand that sounds very local, and it is, but understand also that online education is going far more local, and so those relationships don't preclude online education. I think it's 67% of online students now say that they attend an institution within 50 miles of where they live, when just 5 years ago, that same number was 42%. that is a huge shift. It goes to show how many schools, perhaps smaller institutions, have gotten into the online field with some success and are starting to steal some students, so to speak, from those larger players. And part of the reason I think that they could be or are successful or could be even more successful is through partnerships with local companies that perhaps provide some skills labs or some hands-on learning in the last semester, or whatever that looks like in your model. I think that's critical. One other piece that I would say is, and this is so important, and it has been at Grand Canyon, is full-time online faculty. Faculty who are focused day in and day out at improving the technologies in the classroom and improving training and development for faculty in the learning management system. It is a benefit of scale. And so if you've got a very small online program, it's hard to afford full-time faculty. But I know at Grand Canyon, these folks come into the office every day, or at least they used to. They used to sit next to one another in a cubicle, exchange information, and these are folks that don't want to necessarily move to the traditional classroom. They are so engaged around expanding this online effort. It is their expertise, and I think it's critical.
Johnny, you want to respond or add to that? But I also want to have you weave in another, and that's part of the question that's come up is, I'm familiar with the student as customer idea, but what are the risks of viewing students primarily as customers instead of students? So can you take both parts of that?
Sure, President. First, I'll just address the first question. If you are a faculty member at an existing faculty member at Snow College, and you're wondering what you can do to help in this realm, I would say just to be reminded that we should all be continually learning, and I know at SUU at least a lot of faculty members are. I think there's a bit of fear. What if I'm not good enough? Or what if how much time is it going to take me to learn how to be a good online instructor? You know, all these kinds of questions start to emerge. And what I would just encourage you to do is to say, you know, I'm asking my students to learn new things all the time, and I have an opportunity to learn something new, to meet new challenges, and to potentially help Snow College in new ways, and just go for it. See what it's like, and try to learn something new. To the other question about students as customers, you know, I don't typically like to think about our students as customers either. I like to think about students as people who are trying to achieve a goal. And our institution is here to help them achieve that goal. And we can call them whatever we want. Some people might call them customers. Some people might call them learners. Some people might call them something else. The goal, though, is the same. We want to help them achieve. Some of those people are trying to achieve, they're trying to become a better version of themselves. Some of them are trying to get that first career. Some of them are trying to go from wherever they are in their current career to an advancement. There are all kinds of reasons why people might be engaging with Snow College or Grand Canyon University or SUU. We should be paying attention to them as individuals, and we should be trying to figure out how to help them achieve their goals. I think that's how I look at our people, and we can call them whatever we want. Does that help?
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the student as customer idea? I know that's sometimes a little bit of a nerve for some in higher education, but I think that what is basically meant there is that learners actually have a say in how they're going to consume higher education, right? So, so that whole customer metaphor is not completely irrelevant. They have lots of choices, and are they getting what they need or aren't they? So I think that's I know that's a sort of a nerve ending there, but any other comments on that before we really only have about 5 more minutes, and there are a couple other questions we need to get to.
Well, jokingly, the customer is always right in this scenario is probably not the best way to approach this. So I will say that.
That's right. Yeah. Well, one question here is that Snow College used to be a technical school and then pivoted towards a 2-year higher education. Are we going to pivot back to a technical school? And it's been my experience that online learning is actually harder for students. Hands-on, face-to-face is better. Let me just clarify. So Snow College has always been really kind of more of a destination campus. It did have technical programs. Where Snow College did have, there was a strong technical college offering at the Sevier Valley Technical Center in Ridgefield. And when they merged, I think what Snow College essentially did is sort of marginalize, in a way, technical education in effort of pushing people towards degrees. And I think it was well-intentioned. I think the whole system of higher education in Utah was saying, listen, it's better to get a degree. And that ended up marginalizing a lot of students who actually didn't see themselves as college goers. So what the answer to this is that we're not essentially going back to a technical college, because we still have, but as a comprehensive community college, we offer not only what we're offering now, right, in terms of degrees and credits, but we have an actual obligation to offer technical education too. And what we have a great opportunity is that here in the central part of the state of Utah, there's a donut hole when it comes to technical education being offered. So, Mount Lands Applied Technology in Utah County, Southwest Technology College in Cedar City, but we have a big gap here that Snow College can fill. So it's not an either or anymore. It really is both. And I think that your comment about my experience of online learning is harder for students. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that as a panel. Is that there's terrible online and there's really terrific online, just like there's terrible face-to-face and terrible face-to-face and terrific face-to-face. So how would you respond to maybe this comment that is online learning actually harder for students? And I guess my question is, what student might we be talking about? Anyway, Aaron.
Yeah, President, I would say that really going forward, we're not going to be able to separate the online learning experience from education. It's going to be a part of everything that we do at some level to really be effective. So I think that, yes, it can be harder, and it does require a different approach from an instructional perspective to be successful and create a good experience for the student. But the use of technology in the learning experience is the future. And we have to figure out that blended model. I think there's great power in leveraging those tools as part of the learning experience. It's not an either or, it's both from my perspective and experience. And I just want to say, although I have to drop, it's been an absolute pleasure, President, to be with you guys. I'm super impressed with what you guys are already doing. From sitting in a board perspective, looking at the relationships that you've built and what you've worked on as a system, the integration that you're doing, your partnership with industry, I think you guys are heading in a great direction. And everything we've talked about are already plans in your system. So just keep up the great work. Super proud of what you guys are doing down there.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I know you've got to drop off, but we really appreciate your leadership and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, listen, let me just have kind of the last word around the horn here. Let's start with Vince, and then we'll go to Johnny, and then Roger.
Yeah, I just to your question, President Cook, on the online piece, I do think I know your faculty won't be fooled by the last 3 or 4 weeks of what happened in spring as being online education, although I think that's a risk. Certainly, Zoom is a teleconferencing software. It's not a learning management system by any stretch. I do think, intentional online courses really have a decades-long body of research that support effective teaching and learning. And I think there is a way to do this. It takes time and resources to do online right. It takes a robust classroom. It takes resources to support faculty. It takes instructional design teams that are in sync with faculty, deans, and a school's LMS. So I do think there are ways to do that. I also think it's more difficult for some learners in that environment, particularly mathematics, sciences. We see this with our nursing students, and certainly there are a lot of students, teachers, nurses, counselors, some of the theologians emerging on campus that need to have field experience, be that clinicals for nurses or teaching for teachers. And so some of those pieces I don't think you ever quite clear the hurdle on. We only offer engineering programs through GCU on ground right now. So I think there are some difficulties, but I also think most can be overcome with a substantially well thought out system and program.
Thank you, Vince. Johnny?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that certain programs lend themselves to online, and others I think could be more difficult. Where I stand is I have a hard time when somebody says, I can't do this, we can't do this, this can't be done. I want to try to find ways to accomplish new things, and that doesn't mean that every program should be online. But let's try. Let's try to put those programs where it makes the most sense. Let's try to put them online, and let's try to make them incredible. And in a few years, they will be better than they are now. And let's have a continual improvement focus. I think it's necessary. We have more people who need an education than can come to a face-to-face campus. Let's try to meet those needs, and let's try to improve lives and improve our economy. I think that's what this is about.
Roger.
I've had the opportunity to meet with representatives, I think from, I don't even know, hundreds of universities, but every university has a foundation story, and Snow does as well. In fact, as I walk through your halls and I see the Sunday eggs and I look at the sacrifices that were made 125 years ago to build this institution, I guarantee that there were people back then who said, you can't go out into the middle of nowhere and start a university and teach people and make it successful, because they're not prepared, or they're not ready, or it's not the better way to do it. And if they move up to Salt Lake, that would be a better experience for them than doing it in Ephraim, Utah. And I think that they were wrong at that time. And it is hard to do. It will be hard to do. It will take innovation. It will take time. It's taken us 125 years to get to the point that we're at today, and it's taken higher education hundreds, if not thousands of years to get to the point where they are today. But as technology develops, as we work hard, as we be innovative, as we do our best to try and create things, we will be the founders of the future of Snow College and what it will eventually become. And that for me is really exciting. In fact, that's why I love the work that we're doing, is because someday they're going to look back and they're going to tell the story of how we built these programs and how we fought these battles and how we created these curriculums and how we connected with new audiences, and the impact that it's had on our community and our economies and our state and the people around us and all of the individuals who have benefited from that hard work. And for me, that's really exciting. And I hope that as faculty and as staff and students, we can all enjoy the time that we get to be founders, we get to be pioneers in our own way, and develop great products that can help audiences for years and years to come.
Well, I share your enthusiasm, Roger, and I think this is, I know it's a turbulent time, I know it's a bit of even a scary time, but I've never been in more of an exciting time, I think, in my career, and with the thinking about the potential of Snow College without abandoning its roots, without abandoning its spirit of Snow, without abandoning our really intentional on-campus experience, but by broadening our aperture of delivery, finding ways we can serve better, that we can find students that are underserved, and whether that's through technical education or whether that's through online, we have a really important mission to deliver on. Our families and our communities rely on that, on our success there. So I want to say thank you so much to Vince, Roger, Johnny, Aaron. Thank you so much for your willingness to spend time with us. Let me just say that let's think creatively. Let's be open-minded about how we can continue to improve for our students and for those that are stakeholders in Stowe College. Get involved, ask questions. Let's continue to communicate with each other. We have a commitment here in the President's office to continue to sort of get messaging out, but we also have to make sure that you feel good enough that you can get questions back to us. Our next meeting will be August 18th for our back to school kickoff. Our primary guest will be Kyle Reyes, Vice President of Utah Valley, who will be talking to us a lot about the role of inclusion and what is our role in making our students and faculty and staff feel welcome. Our move-in is on August 22nd and 23rd. Classes start on the 24th. We have a lot ahead of us. We're all sort of prepared with our plan in place. Thank you so much for all that you do. We rely on you. You're valued. And until we meet again, virtually or in person, take care of each other. Thanks.